Alright, welcome back everybody. We're going to do another tomato review on that tomato right there, and that is called the Dwarf Mahogany Tomato. I do believe this is from the Dwarf Tomato Project, and it's a wonderful variety. It's basically a very thick dwarf variety. The stems get very thick on it, and it really has those rugose leaves and really pumps these tomatoes out a lot. It's a determinate variety, so it really puts all its tomatoes out at one shot. And you end up with a ton of these tomatoes. Now, I probably got about 3 times what you see on here still on the plant. So it's a lot of tomatoes. So a lot more than I was actually expecting this year from these dwarf varieties. But if you grow them in the containers by themselves and you just really give them the maximum, amount of light and everything, man, they will definitely throw out a ton of these tomatoes. So let's take a closer look. This one's not so ripe. They've been sitting out here for a little while. Trying to get them ripened. So this one's kind of not in the ripe side. I'm actually going to cut one of the more ripe ones open and taste test that rather than this. I'm going to process these anyway for sauce. So it's okay if they're a little, when they're a little underripe for sauce, you're fine with that. It's not going to get you sick or anything. You prefer this for sauce. Now look at the color of this. And you can see that the color of this tomato is kind of like a brown brick red. It has like a very strange brick color red. So if you ever see red bricks, that's what this would look like, a red brick. And it's also strange looking. It's square. It's a nice little beefsteak tomato. We're going to weigh these. Hopefully you guys can read the weight. It's all the way down here. It's the bottom number. And that's basically ounces, and this is grams on top. I can change that and flip it around. I don't remember how to do it, and usually when I come out here, I just want to get into the reviews. Okay, so it's 7.5 ounces. That's pretty good. Here's one of the bigger ones. This is a big one. Look at this one here. It's kind of weird looking. Now that's a fasation flower. It's a flower that gets a fasation in it, and then this is what you end up with in the end. So when you see these, that's what it is. It's just a fasation in the flower. Okay, that's 9 ounces. That was a lot more. And we'll throw this one on there too. Just gorgeous tomatoes coming out of this thing. 8 ounces. So you can get an idea what they are. They're usually, and then the smaller type, see, like these were falling off before they were ripened, and I was just picking them up off the ground. The plants get so heavy that they, let's throw that on there too. See, that's about 5.5 ounces. So they could range anywhere between 5 ounces and 10 ounces. I would imagine you probably could get them even a little heavier than that, depending on your growing conditions. So let's do a bricks. What I'm going to do is we're going to cut this one open for the taste test, because I want to make sure I get that with all the starches converted over, and give a good look at that. Look at that, guys. Now that is right there. That's what you want to see in the tomato, man. Right there. So let's cut a piece off of that. Let's cut it off the top end. Wow, that's a nice tomato, man. That's a very, very nice thick tomato. See, I just cut it on the side. Nothing in there. It's a lot of meat on this thing. It's a very, very meaty tomato for a dwarf variety. So let's go and squeeze off a little juice. Plenty of juice. Nice and wet. About 5 1/4. That's not bad. That's pretty good for a large tomato like that. Okay, so let's get right into the review. Let's go right out the gate. Start with the sweetness. The sweetness was about a 27, maybe 27.5, somewhere in there. It's pretty high. Had a nice amount of sweetness in it. However, the tanginess was a little bit on the low side, though it wasn't bad. It was just light, a little light on the tanginess. So I'm probably going to put the tanginess at about the same as the sweetness, 27.5, probably more like a 27, almost a little lower than the sweetness. It wasn't terribly low, but it was very equal, and the aftertaste there basically is no tanginess sticking around in that back part of your tongue, and so that kind of, and I tried both tomatoes. I did the I did the really ripe one over there, and then I also did this one, which wasn't so ripe. And I tried to get a little sample of both to see if it's making a difference. Everything seems to be pretty consistent. So this one was maybe a little bit more tangy, but then again, it's not fully ripe. So yeah, the tanginess was a little low on that. I wasn't particularly impressed. However, a lot of the other things are still pretty good with it. The tomato flavor, I'm going to put that about a 5.5. It was just slightly above average. It was a good tomato flavor, but because the tanginess is low, it really keeps that number down. And when we talk about tomato flavor, we're talking about the intensity of the flavor. How strong and prominent was that flavor? Is it still sticking around, or is it short-lived? And it's pretty short-lived, to be honest with you, because of the tangy part. Okay, moisture, we're going to put that moisture at about maybe a 5.5. It's kind of low. Average tomatoes, like store-bought tomatoes, are usually 5s. And we're usually looking to be between a 6 and a 6.5. That's a Goldilocks zone right there. But unfortunately, with this one, we're about a 5.5. It wasn't terribly moist, but it was pretty good. It was still a pretty nice effect in your mouth. It was still pretty moist. Some of that lower moisture might be getting contributed to the texture, and we're gonna get to that. No tardiness, no undertones. Texture, I'm going to put the texture at 4.5. I wasn't particularly super thrilled about the texture. It was a little bit on the creamy side, surprisingly. But it was still it's still texture-wise, it was still a nice tomato. I should actually raise that number to a 5.5. I apologize for that. It's actually a little higher than that. I meant the other way around. I get these mixed up once in a while. At 5.5, I probably would have put it into that 6.5 range. And generally with textures, I like to be 6 and above. You know, you want to be 8, 9, 10 with the texture. You got a perfect tomato. This was a little on the creamy side for me, which isn't bad if you're making sauce or tomato paste or anything like that. But when you're eating them fresh, I personally don't care for the creamy effect that I get in salads, for example. So yeah, it was a little bit on the creamy side. We're just going to go 5.5. You really wanted to see this up around 6, 6.5, 7, 8, somewhere around there. But yeah, it's pretty low. It's a little above store-bought average. When we talk about average, we're generally talking about like store-bought tomatoes. And even store-bought tomatoes are the textures not creamy in general. I don't really ever remember eating a creamy tomato in texture-wise from a store tomato. You don't want to feel that creaminess, and this was kind of on the creamy side. So let's move over to production. Production was absolutely phenomenal. I'm going to put that at about 9 on the production because I mean, I got probably 2 dozen tomatoes, you know, like this. Look at the color of this too. I just want to point this out really quick. Look at that color of this. That's why they call it dwarf mahogany. It's some kind of mahogany color, but man, what a strange looking color, right? It's like a fire engine red color on this thing. Look at that. It's just a deep, dark red orange color. It's very strange looking. So yeah, production's up at a 9. Definitely good on that. Skins were average. They weren't getting stuck in my mouth or anything, so I'm not going to go crazy on the skin rating. Just 5 is fine for that. Seeds, I'm going to put a little bit above average. I'm probably going to put the seeds at a 5.5 and maybe even a 6 on the seeds. Did seem like it has a little bit more seeds than normal. The seeds in this variety tend to be large, but there's a lot of them. So it's gonna take up once you remove all the seed from this when you're making sauce or something like that. It's gonna take out a lot of. You're gonna lose a lot of the water and a lot of the space because the seeds they're so large, you know. So yeah, I'm gonna put that about a 5.5 or 6 on that. Also, too, I want to mention mid-season. You know, the season for it. This is a mid-season, and as far as the plants go, it's a dwarf variety. They don't get too much bigger than about 36 inches to 42 inches, somewhere in there. They don't even really get to 4 feet. They might, but I don't think they will. For me, they didn't get any bigger than about 40 inches, 36 to 40 inches. So how do I rate this tomato from a 1 to a 10, with 1 being the highest? I'm probably going to rate this tomato at about a 3. Now, that doesn't mean that it's not a fun variety to grow. I will be growing it on and off throughout the next couple of years. And it does make remarkably large tomatoes. Now, it could just be that it was seasonal. We did get an extensive amount of rain this year, and that might contribute to some of the lower flavors and the creaminess. Yeah, when you overwater your tomato plants, or your tomato plants are getting saturated with continuous rain, that oftentimes makes tomatoes taste bland or awkward a little bit. A lot of high water content can make tomatoes taste awkward. So that might be what's happening here. However, I can't, the tomato should still deliver a good flavor, because a lot of my other tomato varieties were delivering good flavors this year. So, I mean, take that with a grain of salt. But yeah, I'm just gonna keep this number at 3 for that. And like I said, there were some numbers in here that I wasn't particularly. The one that really killed that rating was the texture on this. That was really, I mean, don't get me wrong. If you were to cut this tomato and put it up in a salad, into a salad, and cut it into cubes, it's gonna hold fine. It's just the creaminess in my mouth I didn't care for. It melted, and usually when tomatoes melt, they're so wet and they break up, and they kind of, you can almost, like, when it breaks up, it's like you could swallow it like a drink. This is more like a milkshake when you go to swallow it. I don't know any other way to put it to you. I don't like the creamy effect on them, on some of these tomatoes. This year it did it. So we'll see if we can maybe work that out of the tomato. Maybe next year it won't do that. So we'll have to see what happens. But anyway, guys, that's your tomato review for the Dwarf Mahogany Tomato. What I'll do is I'll leave links in the description below. You can visit hrseeds.com and pick up your seeds if you want. And I will also leave whatever information I got on the website, as well as the video itself, so you can go either place and read about it there. Alright, guys, so I hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one. Take care.